Asylum seekers in Indonesia say they will still risk their lives by travelling by boat to Australia, despite the very high chance they will never get there. In September, the Australian government under Tony Abbott introduced Operation Sovereign Borders, a policy that would send away asylum seekers who try to arrive on Australian shores by boat. The boat people are now either sent to Papa New Guinea or Nauru for offshore processing, or sent back to Indonesia, where they face notorious detention centres. Although there's been a decline in the number of boats heading for Australia, many are still making the treacherous crossing from Indonesia. Helen Regan reports from Cisarua in Jakarta.
Children fly paper kites against the Cisarua hills. But life for the 800 asylum seekers living in this small Indonesian town is far from idyllic. They live in cramped, overcrowded houses with no money and no way to make a living here. Soong fled Myanmar because he says he was being persecuted for being a Muslim. He's been living in Cisarua with his wife and 2 children for a year. He's already tried to make it to Australia by boat.
नहीं, उसी वक्त में जब हम लोग तूफान मिला है तो लोग ऐसा तरह हो गई तो किश्ती नीचे में पानी आ गई, ठीक है, 3 मिशीन 2 पिसिन मर गई, ठीक है, तो बाद में वहाँ के जो बोतल के पानी भी खत्म, बड़े बड़े बोतल को पानी फेंक कर लोग ये बोतल हाली को बचने के लिए लेती और तेल भी फेंक दिया और तेल के बोतल लेती थी.
Thousands of people like Soong are waiting in Indonesia, sometimes for years, until the UN Refugee Agency processes their claims for asylum to a third country. But many, like Anwar Begum, haven't even made contact with the UNHCR. She was smuggled from Malaysia 7 months ago with her 8 children, and she's desperate.
Di sini duduknya susah. Ya, makananmu susah, lagi sewa rumahnya susah. Orang bagi tuh nasi makanan, ada beras, ada tuh baju-baju.
The Indonesian government considers asylum seekers illegal migrants.
They cannot work. They cannot send their kids to school here. Interestingly, ironically, some asylum seekers with the UNHCR document are still arrested by Indonesian police.
With no rights in Indonesia and with barely enough money to survive on, many asylum seekers can't face the agonizing wait for their claims to be processed here. So they head for Australia.
जो ऐसा फूल तो चल नहीं सकते है ना, बच्चा जो मांगा हम दे ही नहीं सकते, हम जो खाना चाहिए वो चल नहीं सकते, मगर जो हमारा दोस्त ने मलेशिया से थोड़ा मोड़ा पैसा दिया वो लेकर ऐसा गुजार रही.
But Australia says that anyone that comes by boat from Indonesia will never be granted asylum. Instead, they're being processed in offshore camps in Papa New Guinea and Nauru. Australia says their policy is working to stop the boats coming. But Andreas Harsono says asylum seekers will still get on the boats.
There is no certainty by staying inside Indonesia. Inside Indonesia, they are not certain. They cannot work, they cannot go to school, they cannot get a job. Their kids are uneducated. By taking the risk, it is risky, but there is going to be a certainty in the next 24 hours, in the next 3 days, including death.
Since September, over 1,000 asylum seekers tried to get to Australia by boat. To improve the situation, Andreas Harsono says Australia and Indonesia need to work together.
The Australian government needs to work with Indonesia, particularly, but also with the other host countries, because without working with those countries, Australia cannot solve the problem by itself.
Because of the desperate situation of life in Indonesia, many asylum seekers in Cisarua feel the boats are their only option.
क्योंकि इनका बगैर तो हमारा कोई रास्ता नहीं, तो इसलिए तो हम जब ये इंडोनेशिया के जो रिफ्यूजी जो यूएन को देखता है तो बर्मा लोगों को नहीं भेजाती, तो हमारा कोशिश यही है, तो हम कैसे भी हो तो बोट पर अगर पहुंच जाएगा तो फिर हमारा ज़िंदगी अच्छा होगा, तो यही फिक्र है हमारा यहाँ.
Di Australia seharga untuk orang cakap, tapi duduk bersena tu budak-budak Islam sama dia kasihan. Atau budak-budak boleh sekolah, itu saja.
The Australian government vows to maintain its hardline approach, but whatever the risks and whatever the consequences, people who are desperate enough will continue to get on the boats. For Asia Calling, this is Helen Regan from DVB.